I'm Kevin Clark. I'm a pioneer in brand ecosystems and experience strategy and design. And that starts with my first role in that realm as the first brand steward for IBM ThinkPad notebook computers that are today Lenovo, and as director emeritus at IBM Brand and Values Experience at corporate headquarters. Today, I'm the Federation leader and president of Content Evolution, and the chairman and CEO of Choice Flows, and a co-owner and leader of several other businesses. I serve on boards and advise organization leaders around the world. My first request for this talk was from the University Consortium for Executive Education, known as Unicon. It was called Rebranding Executive Education. At the time, executive education was under attack from the big consulting companies. They were diving into the executive education sector. And what Unicon wanted to know, Unicon was created to represent this for exec ed companies at universities. They wanted to know what it would take to shore up and create preference for a university delivered executive education offerings as a brand category. So I've done this many times for creating mind space for new top line categories such as client server computing, the personal computer, the laptop and notebook computer, interactive television, and more since departing from IBM after 30 years of service. And that was during the Smarter Planet era. Well, the Unicon speech and keynote that I delivered was very memorable because I had to deliver it twice. I had to deliver it on a train that was moving from Toronto east to Calgary west across Canada, an especially designed rail car outfitted for presentations. The sponsor that year was a university in Canada, and they wanted to demonstrate the capabilities of this new ability to hold conferences on a train. So that was pretty memorable. My grandfather worked for the Santa Fe Railroad, so I kind of enjoyed that trip. At the time, I was also on the faculty of the IBM Market Management Institute teaching brand experience and the marketing components of the integrated development process in the integrated product management process. 3 decades ago, I helped develop the university's delivered integrated marketing communications curriculum that's being taught today. So the legendary and highly awarded customer and market research professional and Professor John Lynch at Duke University, who was at Duke Fuqua School of Business at the time and is today at the Leeds School of Management at the University of Colorado at Boulder, wrote a case where I'm the protagonist in a customer selection and global user behavior case that's taken me as a lecturer to graduate school classrooms around the world. So I have some minor experience as an educator in this context. And as you know, I'm also partnered with our friend Jemay for Close It, Distribute It. So enough of the throat clearing. Let's talk about rebranding education at the top line category level. First off, from my perspective, education has an inferiority complex going on. It has somehow swallowed the whole saw that those who cannot do, teach. And this is a load of crap. I'm delivering these remarks in the United States, so I'm focused on rebranding education in the US. But I don't think it's I'm too far out of line to say that I wouldn't have to make this statement about how some educators feel about themselves in the profession if I were giving this talk in Japan. I've been working in Japan professionally for almost 30 years now. And when I lecture in Tokyo as a sensei, which is a respected expert and professor in my areas of scholarship, I have the books and articles to back it up. And unlike the United States and our culture, the older I get in Japan, the wiser and more valuable I become. An educator of any type is a very honored person in Japan. And I've seen the same thing teaching at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad, India, in South Korea, in China, and in Germany. We need to borrow a cup of the honor that they bestow on people in the education profession and bring it to our culture to attract some of our brightest and best people to the category and the multiple forms of professional expression it takes. So the first step in rebranding education as a category is to get all the participants to strap in and exude self-confidence and self-esteem. And I know that the people that you may gather is for Close It, are exactly what I'm talking about, but others, that we want to bring along. To know from others in our communities and our nation what is being done and delivered, we want everyone participating to look at this as a top shelf form of occupation. One of the tools of my trade in branding and language is how we use it, how we use language for naming, for describing, for storytelling and narratives. How we use language and phrasing provides positioning for a brand category. So I'd like you to notice that one of the things that we do is in K through 12, we refer to the professionals who do this work as teachers. And when we move to the college and university level, we call the people delivering the instruction professors. We see the roles between the educator and the learner shifting. And perhaps we also want to consider shifting around some of these titles to map up to the new environment we want to embrace. Here's a story. I was invited to rebrand the University of South Carolina Moore School of Business a while back. It's the only female donor-named business school in the United States after business mogul Darla Moore. After getting a briefing about what the school wanted to do, I hit the pause button in front of the dean and the vice dean for operations. I asked him a question. Is the university planning to secede from the state of South Carolina? If not, you'll continue to be the University of South Carolina, right? They nodded. Are you going to give Darla Moore her money back? No. Well, then you're going to continue to be the USC Moore School of Business. Given both of these facts, I don't think you're going to be rebranding the school. You have the brand that you have. And then we sat in silence for a moment to let that sink in. I continued. This said, we can create a new brand experience for USC Moore. And we can make what people experience and associate with you more valuable and desirable. Let's make creating a new experience for the Moore School the focus of our work together. And that's exactly what we did. In fact, we discovered in our work that it would be a good idea to create a new context and a new campus for the business school. Give it a new experience and provide that context for the experience we wanted to create. So Darla Moore, when shown the plan after quite a bit of research, wrote another really big check, and we moved the business school facility and birthed it for a new campus that coexists in the state capital of South Carolina in the city of Columbia. And by the way, the city slogan is famously hot, and in the summer, I can guarantee you it is. So we moved the business school off campus, about 4 blocks down the road into Innovista. Innovista is the city's incubator park. We coexist with the new businesses being birthed and raised all around it. The state legislature in South Carolina is always in a budget and culture war with the university. This said, the plan to move the business school into a context that would attract new business to the state, the dean of the school and the business school itself became the darling of the state legislature and the governor. And they started to create earmarks to get programs USC wanted to grow underway year after year. It's a model for both educating business professionals and incubating the entrepreneurs of the state. And it reputationally and from the rankings this school has one of the best business programs in the world. So USC Moore sparking a new campus attracts an unlikely mix of high-profile students and businesses from around the world to the state. So what does this mean for US education at large? Let's move education down the metaphorical street and give it a new context that will attract resources and respect. So first, what do we want to call education? Education? Does everyone want to be educated? Using this language, a person becomes the object of a process, in this case, education. Now consider the term learning. Would you like to learn something? Or would you like to be educated? Given the choice of language and context, most people want to learn versus being educated. I'm aware that the denotative definition of learning versus education is knowledge gained through experience, and education is knowledge gained through teaching. Education can be said to be well organized, whereas learning is something that is related to an individual's perception. To which I say, this is a definition without a distinction for the purposes of branding and creating attractiveness for the activity. Life, including being taught, is an experience, and what enters and sticks through the lens of individual perception is what we're after. To illustrate what I'm sharing with you in the book, Words That Work, we see the really remarkable language reframing work done by author Frank Luntz. A side note right up front, this section of my remarks, Frank cut his teeth on conservative focus groups, where he magically changes the rules of conversation. In one example, he transforms the word inheritance tax, or the phrase inheritance tax, to death tax. The linguistic jujitsu here is moving the subject of the conversation from taxing people who are inheriting wealth they did not earn themselves to the subject of disrespecting the wishes of people who created an estate over a lifetime and what they want done with it after they've died. Now, I don't care very much about Frank's clients, but I do care about his methods and insights. And in this case, I think he'd side on me on the issue of education versus learning. There's a reason that we embrace the phrase lifelong learning. It's because it conjures the positive benefits of the ongoing adventure of knowing new things and being able to do new things. Would you want to be the object of lifelong education, school that never ends, let alone the term re-education that's used in other parts of the world? This is exactly the problem with the term education from my perspective, because it becomes something people seek to end, to be over with. While learning is a term we welcome. We welcome learning. And we generally embrace being learners. We don't welcome being a student for a lifetime. So let's consider moving from students to learners. Let's move from educators to either professors in high school to extend the esteem of higher education into all of our citizens' lives. And throughout K through 12, we can potentially embrace the term instructor versus teacher, or perhaps even coach. Coaches and instructors, they facilitate, cultivate, and develop skills. And while the denotative definition of a teacher is similar to that of an instructor, the connotative view of a teacher is someone who teaches to or teaches at students in a classroom. Putting it together, we have the potential to reframe from teachers and students to being instructors and learners. The person with the instruction manual for life, with the people interested and willing to learn. I was an Aspen Institute roundtable about the future of libraries not too long ago when travel was possible, and I delivered a similar message to the assembled librarians from all over the country, with a large concentration from California. We were meeting in Sacramento. I suggested to everyone in the room who went to school for library science which is the understanding of information systems and categorizing and accessing human knowledge. And if they had a college degree, all of them were information scientists. That was what there was on their degree. Now, if you're a citizen in a community, a government official, or a business leader, would you seek out the advice of a librarian for your toughest problems? Not likely. Well, you can guess the punchline. They would seek out the advice of an information scientist. So I said, why are all of you in this room continuing to call yourselves librarians instead of leveraging your degree and saying you're information scientists? Telling people in the communities you serve that you have access to top information scientists, and they're right here in our town's knowledge center, the public library. Wouldn't that be a game changer for the resources and respect for what you do? I actually had a special part carved out in the final report that highlighted this insight for all of the libraries right in the United States, which dollies us up and out of this Aspen Institute roundtable and takes us back to the category of education itself. I believe we need to shift from the education sector to the learning sector, from the education industry to the learning industry. Educational consultants being transformed to learning advisors and learning consultants. Learning beats the tar out of education as a desirable top-line brand for what people on this call do for a living. How many people have we been able to attract resources to over the years to educational reform? It's narrow, the phrase is lifeless, and it's become boring. Now, how many people and leaders would write checks and get behind learning innovation? People would pay it. Others would line up to fund it, from businesses, government, individual earner households that, by the way, just discovered in the middle of a pandemic, being an instructor is a tough and highly skilled role, right? That they want to get back to the professionals doing. We need an invitation to adventure, an advance from educational reform and revolution to the e-formation and evolution of fully human learning for everyone at all stages of our life as our cognitive and perceptual capacities continue to emerge. The learning profession has never had a better moment to frame and evolve itself into a more noble, desirable, and attractive status in our society right here post-pandemic. So this is the brand thesis and positioning. Move from education to learning as the key word to embrace. But we're not done yet. My scholarship in branding led to the other discipline that makes brands thrive and endure. And that's what a brand actually delivers, the experience people have after the brand promises. This is why I talk about brand experience today versus brand or experience alone. Brand experience is a two-cycle engine that powers a relationship with people. Part of a new book that I'm writing, and you'll get a preview of this core thesis right now. The book is called The Invitation, and the thesis is the brand invites, the experience delights. If you do that over and over again, you have a winning cycle that draws people in and attracts and retains their attention and resources. It's like the shampoo bottle. Lather, rinse, repeat. So go with me a little bit longer and think about what experience we'll want to deliver if we embrace learning as our core mission. What would a learning experience look like, sound like, and feel like versus a primarily visual and verbal education experience? For instance, what would it smell and taste like? In France, learning is inextricably, I didn't say that word, right? Inextricably fused with great food, taking on added dimensions of smell, taste, and texture. It's part of learning and appreciation for the quality of life that's infused into the learning experience. My wife, Heidi, is a master gardener. She's an officer of the North Carolina Garden Club and on the board of governors of the North Carolina Botanical Garden. In the local elementary school system, she introduced, as you may have seen elsewhere, the practice of children planting a garden in parallel with their science lessons. The garden shows progress and makes the lessons come alive. There is pride in the growing and celebration at the end of spring when there's a harvest and a meal inspired what the young learners have grown. It's a small page from France imported to the United States. Further, as we embrace learning versus education, learning would be framed as a we, in contrast to education, where there is the I as the educator and then the all of you as students. It would take down the barrier between the person delivering and the people receiving. Keep the technical jargon for the profession itself. I 100% respect that. Yet for branding purposes, we could use the simple language of learning as the relationship between givers and receivers, or the biological term interactors, or as the cultural anthropologists call it, gift exchange. Everyone has a gift to bring to life and to the day and to the narrative. Let's advance to what we've been talking about, to the current edge of my areas of research, where I'm publishing on the design of culture and the design of presence. And for our discussion today, the design of presence is the most relevant. Experience that we've been delivering in both commerce and education is constructed like attending a theatrical performance, such as a play, a concert, or a movie. We have a proscenium stage where the action takes place with teachers, and the students are in the audience to receive the performance. I've been working to tear down the barrier between the stage and the audience. In fact, Close It Distributed is also designed to do just that, make everyone a contributor. Everyone has an opportunity to be on stage. And again, thanks to Jumei for sharing the back and forth about what this represents and what it can become, and this thinking, and the urge to invent with me in the distributed practice. So, okay, instead of an experience design where you create a spectacle for others to watch and hear, you embrace the design of presence where full human interaction is possible. We erase the barrier of stage and create a space for interaction and collaboration. And this is the design of presence. This is where I want to take the new promise of learning as the new brand category next. Reformulating what I said before for the beginning branders, now that you're in grad school, the brand invites and our presence with each other delights. Or more fulsomely for our discussion today, the learner is invited and with learning is delighted. Are we designing for delighted learners, just as we would for delighted customers in the marketplace? I think we have a ways to go, as do our companies and our systems of governance in terms of delighting our customers and our citizens. In the realm of experience and presence, let's design for more than function. Let's design for delight, for the joy of learning. And by extension, should you choose to accept it, the society that has the most joyful and engaged learners, by default, will have one of the most vibrant economies and have happy and well-adjusted citizens. If you want some of my crystal ball gazing for what's next in brand presence, or by implication, learning presence, let me know. As an aside, I used to co-own a company called EduPresence with a very smart fellow named Ray Smith. We had to shut the doors because the concepts we were offering were ahead of their time. The window for what we were envisioning are only beginning to present themselves now. I've lived in this future and its scenarios and can share it with anyone who's interested. As we emerge from our homes and back into the bright sunlight of possibility, I encourage you to embrace the power of the word learning, the enduring embrace of learners wanting to learn, and creating presence and experience that fosters a longer continuum of curiosity, of esteem for knowledge and skills acquisition, and for a full human lifespan of learning. Thank you for your gift of time and allowing me to share these thoughts with you today. So, Jemay, back to you.
Wow, that's very, very inspiring. And it looks like the audience agrees. Does anybody have questions? I get excited thinking about it. Bill Hughes, you know, I like your question. Okay, I mean, I've got questions, but let's look at Bill. You're definitely onto something. Are there early indicators for the model you're describing? And what would that business model look like? And you're a business model guru too. So what does that look like?
Yeah, well, preceding a business model is, you know, we're talking about a category model, right? As we're talking about, you know, trying to get a wholesale replacement of what do we call it, right? That we're trying to get everyone to embrace. So from my perspective, the model that we want is the following: is we want to do something that, whether you're in education or not, let me give you this example. Andrew Carnegie, very wealthy man, built one of the great museums of the world for artists and to house great art. Now, he was not an artist, right? He knew he wasn't an artist, right? But he had a lot of respect and wanted to provide this home, right? So he was pumping his resources up into a place that he couldn't occupy, right? But that he wanted to, you know, provide, you know, the ability for it to exist. So if we elevate the profession and, you know, that learning becomes one of the things that is key to what we want as citizens and as people throughout our lives, the right resources start to flow into the space because it's something that we highly value, all right? And it stops, the context of it being an early life notion evaporates, and it becomes something that we need to be able to do throughout our lifetime, and therefore everybody is benefiting, right? I once, you know, during that same conference at the Aspen Institute, I said, look, libraries, you have space. You have the convening function of a community to be the place where everyone finds knowledge and learns. Provide one or two spaces in your library and connect to your community or your technical college system and deliver, you know, video connected classrooms so that every community has, you know, graduate education beyond high school available to the people in that community. And, you know, they're kind of working on that. You know, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was behind, you know, this inquiry. And, you know, from my point of view, you know, if we can find those places and cultivate that kind of sensibility, you know, the possibilities are pretty endless. So I'm saying category first. So it's a category model. Then you can have business models, right, that support this. And the first thing that I would do is, you know, select the attractive language, right, for what people want to do. They want to learn.
So Bill said, if we look at all the per capita funding a person is eligible for and empower them, there's plenty of money to pay for lots of learning. I think that's right, Bill, but the learner themselves don't know how to find it. So, you know, it's just it's cumbersome to find the money, but I agree that money follows the loan.
Let me give you something else that was suggested, which is, and this is directly from work that I've done, with the government,
Mhm.
is when you onboard young people to go into military service, the original, notion was we need able-bodied people to go into these roles, right? Now, think about the force of the future. That's what they call, thinking about, what is this going to be like X number of years from now, and what kind of people do we want to hire? If you have one person with their hand on a joystick
Mhm.
that has the same kinetic strike force as a battalion, right?
Mhm.
Do I want an able-bodied person or able-minded person?
Yeah, definitely.
Do I want somebody who, has a fully formed prefrontal cortex and understands consequences? And that's usually around 25 or 26. That means we're going to have to, we're going to need a smaller group of people who have more,
Mhm.
that can make better informed choices. And we need to onboard them at a later age, or we need to be training them for a longer period of time before they ever get the opportunity to act. Implication is, if you were able-bodied in your teens, what if every decade from teens to, let's say 30, 40, 50, that you had a citizen needed to contribute something, that was at your community level when you're 30,
Yeah.
at the national level when you're 40, all right, or maybe the state level at 40, and at the national level when you're 50. And then for the people who really did well at this laddering process of doing something as a citizen and preparing for it, what would you have to do? You'd have to learn, right?
Yep.
As you were preparing for this, the ambassadors and the people that we needed as senior civil servants, as they exited their professional careers, becomes the crop of people that are going to be the great ambassadors and the great civil servants for the next decade of their life, right? That we would have already cultivated them for these roles.
Right.
That's going to put a lot of resource behind learning.
So Brian Alexander had a question, and it's definitely timely. Stuart Armstrong, I see you on, which is great because you're looking at this digital education. So how does an all digital education experience best do that mix of invitation and delight? And Stuart Armstrong and I had a discussion about this. What are the technology of the future that are delightful and inviting and engaging
Sure.
for learning?
So I'll make a couple of observations. So the first is, when I briefly mentioned the EduPresence business, what we were talking about doing is using telepresence, right? For those of you who aren't familiar with that in detail, is what we're doing right now is video conferencing, all right? So you see it's like television, right? You see my head and so on and so forth. Telepresence is more fully immersive, where if I were to stand up and walk around in the room, everyone would be the same size. They would be life size, right? As opposed to sitting on a small screen. And we would be able to walk up to a whiteboard, and one person would be in another country and one person would be in another. And we would be able to experience what was happening the same way as if we were in each other's presence in the same room.
Well, that's funny because Stuart, when you and I spoke, I said, I see it as a telepresence for the future. But what happened to telepresence, Kevin?
Okay, well, telepresence is like a private jet, okay?
Yeah.
It is relegated to the boardrooms, and it connects elites to elites, all right? Boardrooms to boardrooms. We tried to install it in higher education, and it collected dust, right? The professors didn't want to use it, all right, because, they like teaching, people face to face. And the one company that sold this tech, which was Cisco. I mean, Sony sold it, Lifesize sold it, there are just a whole bunch of other firms, but Cisco had this in all their offices. So the people who really know how to use this technology to its best advantage are Cisco and ex-Cisco people. I mean, they actually are living in the future, right? But that's one aspect of this, is that we would live in a smart environment and we would, this is one of my theses, is that people who are going to have to use and carry around a device in the future are going to be the disadvantaged people, because the people who move away from devices are because they live in a smart environment, that the entire environment that they live in, they work in, is responsive to what they need. The entire wall becomes a screen. You don't need devices. It's because what you live in is fully immersive. And so education and learning becomes really interesting when you're able to fully experience it that way. Some of the other tech that that delivers presence is, so what, if I don't meet with you, if I weren't with you and had never met you, Jamae, I never would have had any pheromone exchange. All right. We process a lot of information in our primitive brain in the amygdala about whether you're trustworthy and all kinds of stuff based on, a subtle pattern that we're picking up on. What do you smell like? I mean, I'm not actually, actively thinking about what does Jamae or anybody else in the room smell. But in terms of developing trust, this is an integral part of how we're wired, all right, as animals. So one of the things that we want to be able to do is take the work that's being done at MIT and the MIT Media Lab and a couple of other places, and be able to transmit smell. The subtlety of being each other's presence. And literally, if we were having a meal, that I could experience some of what you're having in the other room at the same time that you're smelling what I'm eating, all right, when the meal period comes. Because guess what? Some of the most resilient trust that is built at a conference takes place in the breaks and the meal periods, not when you're facing forward and listening to people. And that you're an expert in this, Jamae.
So any other questions? I have a couple of closing questions kind of on the future of learning, but does anybody else have anything to ask of Kevin in the chat? Good comment, Kima.
Don't be shy.
Learning happens in the flow of life. I can feel those Hawaii waves right now. I assume you're still in Hawaii. Yeah, it happens for sure. So
it looks like a question from Brian Alexander, Jamae, in the chat.
That's what I just did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I got that one. Yeah, I got Brian's. Kevin.
Yes.
Higher ed's easier for this. So to me, K-12 is just a total nightmare. I mean, we're graduating kids that can't read or do math, and I don't even want to go there. It's so frustrating. So I don't know what's going to happen to K-12, because it just seems to continue to put learners out that then society has failed, etc. So that's my concern about that. But what's the future of higher education look like if it's not education, if it's learning? Which really, I think most of the dropouts start happening at 15, 16, based on the research we've done, and it's when they can go to work. So what does it look like? Are there classrooms a decade from now? Are there classrooms?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are still places where there are going to be classrooms. In fact, I think there are you can't do a physical education class, and do anything on a team basis really easily remotely, right? So the fact is, if you consider that to be, kinesthetic learning to be part of the total basket of things that we need to do, you can't do it all online, right? We are a net importer of great learners across the world for our our college and university system. I
Yeah.
mean, people like to come here to learn, right? So we're actually doing okay there. The bridge between how K through 12 filters into that is somewhat problematic.
Yeah.
I think you know that in Germany, you graduate from high school at 14th grade. There are 2 more years, okay, that you go to school, which could be representative of our community college system or something else. But I think that that the educational experience for the complexity of the world that people are entering, it isn't long enough anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And, there are some classes that are missing. We've got to open up some room in the curriculum. People need to get taught statistics. People need to have the ability to have a course in symbolic logic before they go to college, right? Because, that shows you how, language is constructed and how arguments are constructed so that you can, defend yourself, right? I mean, we have way too many people who are, don't have the basic tools.
Well, I would agree with that because the kids we're working with, which, are in our pro skills, are 17 to 24. My own
Yeah.
daughter, that's going to be a senior in high school, by the end of 12th grade, they've gotten all of those requirements. And maybe they took cooking and bench press or whatever. But nobody really, unless they're in, a trade school, they aren't getting any of the technical skills they need to go get a job. Yeah,
No,
they
100%.
really aren't.
And because we got rid of things like, in many cases, shop and home economics as part of this, people don't know how to put together a budget. They don't know how to do their personal finances. They don't know how to feed themselves. They don't know how to repair anything in their home, right? And have you ever heard of Warren Wilson College before?
Nope, I haven't. Maybe the
Okay, well, maybe this is a good place to end. Warren Wilson College is a handful of schools in the United States where when you go in, you're going to get a degree, English, history, economics, something, that you would recognize. And at the same time, the students are apprenticed into a trade. They are doing woodworking and working the, forestry management for the forest that they're in groundskeeping, they're in food services, they're in hospitality management. The students run the college. There's a dean of labor, all right? And at the same time that they're educating themselves to become, deeply knowledgeable about, English or economics, they're also working. Every one of the students there built the buildings on the campus. So they go, oh yeah, I remember that, when we put up the, that hall, all right? And
That's interesting.
like 95% of the students, the employers in the region are lining up to hire these young people because they know how to do something, right? And they understand, as they say, the dignity of labor. They're not isolated from the learning of the academy. They're able to integrate the knowledge with the ability to work together. And so that's a pretty remarkable gift that they have. And I think a little bit of that needs to be sprinkled throughout what we're doing so that we have fully functional citizens and a new kind of learner coming out that's really ready for life. So I'll just stop there.
Awesome. Kevin, are you okay if I share your email?
Please.
It's in the closed community anyway. So if anybody wants to reach out to Kevin, there is his email. This was really a great discussion. And I hope somebody wants to take this on seriously. I mean,
I would love to see the Department of Education rebranded as the Department of Learning, right, for the US, right? That would be, is that they should be taking that on as the task. So it's
that's-
delightful being with all of you, and I hope I provoke some thinking
Thanks, Kevin.
and some action. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.